welcome to my presentation today. I'm thrilled to be here with you. My name is Dr. Stephanie Cawthon. I'm a faculty member at the University of Texas here in Austin in the College of Education. My presentation today is entitled The Tyranny of Low Expectations, Ableism in Education. That hashtag that you see there at the bottom of this opening slide is something that I'll be using now and into the future. We'll start that out today. Thank you all so much for coming. The first concept that I'd like to explain a little bit about is my working definition of the term ableism. This includes attitudes, behaviors, and any idea or concept that supports the idea of people with disabilities who are less than or inferior to people without disabilities. And this is people without disabilities, the attitudes that they have toward those people. Now, often people with disabilities have that attitude about themselves as well. People often are afraid or avoid any interaction or are uncomfortable engaging with people with disabilities or disabilities in general. And that is pervasive. You see it often in attitudes and behaviors throughout different contexts, specifically in the educational setting. So here's that hashtag again. I've got it blown up on this slide for you. Ableism in education. I wrote a blog post recently. On my website, you can find that blog and see more about that concept and why it's important. We see it often, people using hashtags with ableism in the hashtag. I'd like to add the in education because it's a critical piece to recognize that that place in education, there's ableism happening frequently for students, for parents, for teachers, staff, faculty, administration. There are laws and policies put in place that impact ableism in education. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Got to stop talking. You see the schoolhouses on the slide before you. There are many different types. Now, at the front, you can see it very clearly. The colors are bold. The design is very clear. That represents the full experience of accessible education. Think about resources, training for teachers, time available for planning, policies and advocacy support in diversity. This is a full and complete opportunity for students to learn and reach their full potential in an educational setting with access to the entire school. The other schoolhouses that you see on this slide become more and more in the shadows as you look at the slide. Sometimes resources aren't available. That's a less equitable experience. There's time and energy that people expend fighting just for access, both for the students and the parents of the students. Sometimes there are policies that discriminate against people with disabilities. Oftentimes it's more about the building, the physical space itself. And even sometimes it's a simple thing, just like no captioning available for videos in a classroom. Really, there are a lot of different ways that we can think about shadows in education for people with disabilities and how they might experience that. Again, it's not always just the students. It's also staff, faculty, parents, administrators. Accessibility to education really requires a lot of attention to that full experience. Shadow education, that's something that we are noticing daily now and we need to pay more attention to. My second working definition for today's presentation is accessibility. To really think about opportunities. And that's what education is for, opportunities. So when we think about accessibility, we need to think about opportunities to engage with information, with concepts, with thoughts, people, peers, and adults alike. But also with yourself, individually, and learning about ourselves. When you went to school, was it formal education, or was it more about the incidental learning? And what kind of natural and organic ways do we learn? Access and equity really means an equitable that equitable energy is required to access that experience in that space. When you create and design accessible learning environments, what I envision is I really think about 3 different pieces. The first thing that I think about is disabled people. Often it's required of them to fight and expend energy and time. Then the burden falls on that individual. It really should be placed on the collective group to create an accessible, equitable experience, not just the one person fighting for accessibility or that one parent, that one student. It needs to be a team effort where everyone's involved because this impacts everyone in the setting. The outcomes are so important for each and every one of us. If disabled people are not achieving their highest potential, that impacts every one of us. And access is everyone's responsibility. The second thing that we're learning, that I've learned through my research specifically, is that access is more than accommodations. It's not limited to just that. You often think about, like for today's example, an interpreter, or extended times on a test, maybe closed captioning for media and videos. Yes, those are all critical pieces. Those are accommodations, absolutely. But without a positive experience or attitude, then it becomes worthless. They are just then accommodations, but does not create access. Again, access is more than just an accommodation. The third point is that access really has to be intentional. It doesn't happen just after the fact. If you design, for example, the conference here, if we're only thinking about access after the fact and it's reactionary, things will go sideways. We've got to think about it from the get-go, from the design phase. Every meeting you have has to include accessibility. I think about Zoom meetings. We're all in Zoom meetings every day right now. When I go into a Zoom meeting, I oftentimes have to prompt the host and say, hey, can you turn on the auto captions? Hey, can you turn on those captions? I'm like, come on guys, I'm here with you every day. Why do I have to ask for that accommodation, that accessibility piece every day? It should be once and done. Make a checklist if you need to. You're letting guests into your meeting, you turn on that captioning. Don't assume that every time someone will prompt you. And for me specifically, it's just not equitable. It's not equitable for me nor anyone else with disabilities. So thinking about accessibility after the fact does not create an equitable experience for anyone. So designing supported learning environments, what might that look like to each of you? I often ask people that. I'll say, what do you think about when you hear this? How do you think about it beforehand in terms of accessibility for equity? And in regard to the tyranny of low expectation, how do we include that idea, that concept of high expectations and apply it to everyone? In education, we don't want a shadow education for anyone. We want a full experience, well-designed. How are we doing that? How do we proceed? You know, we know a lot more now than we used to. I've been in this field for about 30 years. Some things have remained the same. Other things we're learning now. And so we need to leverage that and apply it when we're designing these experiences. The first thing to consider is the impact of access and barriers in the first place. Sometimes we don't even recognize that it's there, that that barrier even exists. Sometimes people with disabilities are not included in the decision-making process. I often wonder why that is. They know a lot. It's their experience. It's their lived experience. They've done a lot of educating. They've learned a lot. They recognize and understand the impact of these barriers on their daily lives, in their education, in their training, and at their workplace. There's a lot of things that are involved with that. Ask around. Be curious about that. See what you find out. And if you don't know now, you can certainly learn. There are lots of resources. We can help recognize where these gaps are and where our weaknesses are in each of our contexts. Ask questions. Again, become curious. Another thought is to consider some flexibility in your academic pathways and how we can achieve the same goals. When we talk about disabled people, they can achieve, and that's true. It may not be the exact same pathway or approach as everyone else in a larger setting, and that's fine. It's not that it's any worse or less than, often it's just that it's different. But we need to have those same high expectations set for everyone, but with different pathways making it possible. So I wonder what each of your contexts are like. How is it designed to incorporate this concept? Now, what have we learned from COVID? So many people with disabilities now, and I use air quotes because these disabilities are new and they've cropped up during COVID. And what's great is we can leverage technology. We have options. This has created huge opportunities for accessibility for everyone. So how can we create and provide these options as we move forward in learning environments? Maybe the organization of your course or your curriculum. Maybe not everyone has to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that sequence, in that order. Maybe they can hop around and hit 1 through 5, but in a different order. In one course that I teach at the University of Texas here in Austin, it's the Culture of Disabilities in Education. I've created 2 distinct pathways for students. I've designed them intentionally. The content is related. We have core content that kind of divides in these 2 pathways. I've got these 2 approaches that they can use. Students get to choose which one is better fit for them, which one suits their interests, their needs, their skills, and their future career path. It wasn't difficult, but it was something that I realized there was a need there. And it was at the core, it was a foundational need, and there was information that everyone needed to know. I just needed to figure out how we could apply it in these 2 different ways, and this is a part of their learning. So if we can figure out that flexibility in our design, when you're designing and developing your curriculum, that's key for those with different learning styles and disabilities. The third thing is related to identity. Everyone has multiple identities. Now, sometimes a disability is just one of those identities, and it's an important one. Some disabilities are visible, some are hidden or invisible. Some are acquired, and they show up later in life. Others, people are born with. Each one has an impact on the identity development process. And it's not only, this doesn't only apply to children, this also applies to adults. And when you think about identity, think about who your students are, who the learners are, and how disability is incorporated into that learning. One thing to recognize is that disability often is not a part of the curriculum. The curriculum writer, the employees, the people who were spotlighting disability doesn't often show up. Who are your examples? Who do you have representing other people? The role models for students. Do you have anyone with a disability? Are they incorporated within the videos that you use, the curriculum that you're teaching? The resources are there, but often they show up in isolation. They are not leveraged. And when you can, if you can incorporate those examples of disabled people achieving their goals and being successful, just living their lives, try to normalize this. And disabilities, reducing those gaps and lowering that tyranny of low expectations, thus getting rid of the stigma associated often with disabilities. And as I mentioned, disabilities don't often stand alone. There's a concept of intersectionality with other identities that individuals experience, and they overlap, thus the term intersectionality. Now, sometimes it's an impact of the disability, and it impacts men and women differently. You know, you can read the research and the data about employment statistics. A person with disabilities has a lower income earning potential, and also women are even lower than that. There are so many other factors. There are layers of identity that really impact and increase these barriers. It's so important that we recognize ableism because this does not stand alone. Again, intersectionality is a very real experience for so many of us. And now, finding your call to action as individuals. When I present in other workshops and conferences, I'm able to go far more in depth, and I'm able to challenge people to knowing that you can do something within your own environments and contexts. Everyone has the ability to answer this call to action. So I'd like to give you 3 examples from my life currently. As I mentioned, I'm a faculty member at the University of Texas in Austin, and I'm responsible for teaching students. My course that I teach, The Culture of Disability in Education, is designed to be a general course for everyone on campus to be able to access. I have over 100 undergraduates who take this course each semester. And they're from all across campus. They're all UT students. They're not just in the educational department. It's really interesting to see who takes this course and what their motivation is, because it's not a required course. It's really a very diverse course, and it really heightens their understanding of disabilities. Let's say for marketing, for legal students, for engineers, really everyone can benefit. There's a gain to be had from this course. And my call to action right now is to make this far more pervasive, get the word out to everyone and anyone, because you don't know what you don't know. But then after that course, and people have taken it, they are really floored. They feel like they are more connected to people in greater ways. They don't feel as maybe awkward or hesitant or uncomfortable when they meet a person with a disability. Let's say a person in a wheelchair. They know how to approach them, what to do. They know what to and what not to say without feeling awkward. And it's so nice to give this opportunity to these students so they know that they're able to interact with people in a new and different way. The second role that I play currently is in faculty leadership. In fact, I just set up, there's a launch for this new program, a Faculty Disability Council. There are lots of equity councils at UT, but there's been nothing related to disabilities. There is a huge emphasis on diversity. However, disability doesn't make an appearance there. And so we've established a new committee, and I'm so impressed. Yes, it should be a part of diversity, but we are seeing the impacts of ableism on instructors and faculty members daily. They need more support, and how to even navigate the legal context and these educational settings with their peers in the workplace. This is their daily lives. How does a faculty member navigate that? This doesn't only impact those students, it also impacts professionals in their daily lives. The third thing that I'd like to talk about today is another thing that I'm involved with. I've set up a new program, it's a new initiative, and it's being supported by Microsoft. It's very interesting. It's about how to learn from students, disabled students themselves, and how to learn from them directly and their lived experiences. So they're focused specifically in this program, they are leading the way. They are teamed and paired up with a faculty member, but the initiative is the students coaching the faculty about accessibility. And those students, again, they have a variety of different disabilities. They are teamed up with faculty members who are learning from them about how to best design their courses, how to improve them, how to understand that lived experience from students with disabilities, how to incorporate it all the way down into the foundation of the course and their syllabus, their tests, the assignments, really taking a hard look at those students because the faculty has now become curious. So those are just 3 examples from me in my current life and how I'm answering my own personal call to action. So what is your call to action? I really encourage each of you, and I'd love to be in touch with you. Please reach out. I'd love to have an additional conversation about you and what's your call? What does it look like? What are you doing? Where you're at? So here's my contact information. My website is there at the top. My blog is posted weekly there. My email address, you're able to reach out to me there. My Twitter and my LinkedIn handle. I know so many people here on Twitter and they're hashtagging all over the place. It's very hashtag friendly. I love that. And again, like I say, my LinkedIn handle, everything is there, and I'd love to hear from each of you and connect with you. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate that. Wave with your hands to clap. Thank you so much. Thanks. We'll see you later, alligator. Have a great afternoon.